Be as persistent as you possibly can, because even though it feels like nothing's ever going to happen your way or be the way you want it, eventually it will. If you're persistent enough, it will.
Welcome to a Life Creative Podcast. I'm Melania Gomez.
And I'm Marcy McGoldrick. This is the podcast where we share stories, support, and advice for the creative community while they navigate their careers.
Whether you're running a business, pursuing a passion, or just trying to connect with other creators, we're here to bring you practical tips, insights from experts, and a little inspiration.
David Mann is the founding principal of MR Architecture Decor, which he established in 1995. Known for creating meticulously crafted architecture and interiors, the firm collaborates with luxury retailers like Dior and Lanvin, as well as hospitality, commercial, and private residential clients around the world. Renowned for its collaborative approach and highly personalized service, MR has been featured in Architectural Digest, Elle Decor, the New York Times, and more, and has earned spots on the AD 100 and Elle Decor A-list. David is also a frequent contributor and guest critic at Pratt, his alma mater, as well as Parsons, the New York School of Interior Design, and other industry forums. David, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
So we wanted to start early with you because you, from a pretty early age, you knew you wanted to be an architect. Can you talk a little about how that came about and how you kind of trained yourself in the beginning?
I'm not exactly sure how it came about, and the oddity for me is that my dad's a doctor, his brother was a doctor, his uncles were all doctors, but there was never pressure for that. What I believe happened was my mother had a boyfriend when I was probably about 5 or 6. I do remember him. His name was Aubrey Banks. I hope I'm not scandalizing anyone's family by saying this, but my mother dated him for a while, and we would go, he was a Taliesin student at the time, and we'd go out there and picnic, and I really liked him. I liked the whole experience. I loved seeing the architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright at such an early age. But when I asked my mother why she didn't marry him, she said, oh, he was gay.
But in your own home, did you just notice architectural features of just that appreciation for it? Because you said you drove around with your mom,
yes,
looking at homes, which is I love.
We did. We would drive around. That was fun for us. We'd just drive around looking at people's houses, and that was one of my favorite things to go and do. Or we would go to the model homes because they were building like
love
crazy
model
everywhere.
homes.
And then I don't know about you, but Phoenix was expanding so much. That's where I'm from originally. Mm-hmm. I would go and go to the building sites, and they'd have a cement pad, and then some of them would have some of the studs up, and I tried to figure out where the living room was and the dining room. So those are early memories of being inspired by architecture and the process of architecture. But you mentioned getting and looking at plans when your family.
Oh yeah, I was so fascinated. My dad had an office built, and the architect rolled out that huge piece of paper, and what is this? I just wanted to know what it was and how it worked. And that bird's eye view, which you also explained, which is kind of incredible that you got a job really early on. How old were you?
Probably 14 or 15 as a draftsman in an architect's office. I had been drawing since maybe I was 10 or 11.
Yeah.
I had a drafting board. My brother bought me that. He really was thoughtful enough to know what I wanted. And I was glued to that thing, and I was pretty good for a kid that age.
And did you teach yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah?
My mother brought home a set of plans from a bank. I thought, how in the world did you get this? I can rob this place.
She robbed the bank of plans.
Yeah, exactly.
She was probably dating somebody.
She was really hooking you up.
Yes, she was. She was setting her kid up. But I was, mesmerized by plans and drawings, and I was drawing from a very early
Who
age.
taught you drafting at that age?
Self-taught. I did take it in high school, but I was really, really much more experience than anybody else in high school.
Before internet, before YouTube, before any kind of how-to to look up, you to figure this out is kind of incredible. Child labor laws, FYI.
Yes, I'm sure my mother would be in jail for that, among other things. But the funny thing is, when I went to college, and now I'm really friendly with this guy, there was one other kid, because I thought I was going to college and I was going to be the next Frank Lloyd Wright.
And you went to Pratt.
I went to Pratt.
You went to Pratt.
There was another kid in our class who made me incredibly depressed because he had extraordinary skills as well. It turns out that he was married, his parents were married in a Frank Lloyd Wright in Elkins Park in the temple there, and that his family were friends with Robert Venturi. So he had been working in Robert Venturi's office as a high school
That's
student.
fancy. That's so fancy.
Yes.
Were you guys the top two?
Well, I would think in that class we probably were, but I was depressed at knowing that there was somebody out there with skills like that. And ironically, we lost contact with each other, but about 3 or 4 years ago, we ran into each other at a party, and we found out we lived near each other upstate. So we spent a lot of time with the weekends, his family and my family, and it's a lot of fun up there.
Oh, that's nice.
It is an important point. Like when you go, if you're a creative kid and you go to somewhere like Pratt, all of a sudden you're in this arena of people on your level, and sometimes I think in the beginning it is intimidating because you're just like, whoa, I'm not the only talented one here. Or the other aspect of it is like, I found this sort of tribe of people that I have so much in common with. And I had a little bit of both happen.
Absolutely.
Well, I also feel like it's the type of thing where you want to try harder because you see that somebody else has a skill and you're like, oh, I want to get as good at them as this. And then you look at somebody else and you kind of look at what they can do, and it is kind of hopefully motivates you to do.
Well, I think that's one of the things about school that's so interesting is that you go there thinking it's the teacher you're going to learn from, but really you probably learn a lot more from your peers.
From your peers, yeah. That information, how you did something, shortcuts, everything, materials, what paint to buy, what tools to buy, all that stuff is sort of self-learned, but with your co-students, right?
Right.
So after Pratt, what was your first job?
My first job was working for somebody I met socially. It was a small firm called Handler Rosenberg. And we worked on the offices of M & Company.
I loved M & Company.
Yeah,
Tibor Kalman.
Tibor, yeah. And unfortunately, Larry Rosenberg died of AIDS. He was one of the first people I know who died of AIDS. So I wanted to get health insurance. So I went to work for a very large firm and stayed there for like 12 years.
But that thinking of, that young, and I came to the city probably around the same time you did, and, AIDS did devastate a creative community. But you are put in a situation at 20 where you're experiencing this. But the idea of saying to yourself, you know what, I have to take care of myself and I need to.
That's right.
The practicality of insurance. And a lot of young people don't think about that. They think they're young, they're healthy, I'll just make do.
But also coming from a family of doctors.
Family of doctors. Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But it was funny to me because I thought I'm only going to stay at this firm and get my insurance and then go back and do what I was doing because I liked working at this smaller firm. At the same time, working at a smaller firm, I was doing a lot of freelance work.
Okay. On your own?
On my own.
Okay. At
night or whatever. Even after I had the real job.
How did you get those clients?
How did I get the
freelance work?
You know what? It was all over the place.
Okay.
Everybody back then, there were so many opportunities in so many different ways.
Okay.
Like I'd help somebody do their kitchen.
Okay.
Or somebody got a loft space and they needed help just figuring it out. And I was just much more than the money, just eager for the experience. And a lot of these people were creative and interesting. And so it was, New York City was very different then. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Did you feel that you always knew you wanted your own firm, but you felt like it was good to be in these places to gain the experience and exposure to different types of projects, and you were kind of getting to learn on someone else's
Yes, except my vision was I did not want to have a firm on my own. I wanted to have partners.
Okay.
Was it because of just the financial burden or just the sharing, getting clients?
I think I recognized that I was good at some things, but not good at everything.
Right.
And I thought I needed people who were better at the things I felt like I wasn't as good at.
Right.
And the truth is I did have a partner when I opened my own firm, but only for a very short amount of time. And then that person left. They got a huge project, decided they wanted to do it on their own.
Okay.
And so I was left with a firm with projects. And from that, I just built it into what it is now.
What was that partner's sort of specialty? Was it getting clients, client relationships, or sales? What did he sort of bring that you didn't?
That's actually, I think, the crux of it. I was incredibly shy and intimidated by almost everybody back in the day.
Right.
And he was very outgoing, very flamboyant. He was
More of a
very
salesman,
showy.
kind of
Yeah. And I didn't feel like I had that.
Right.
It turns out that a lot of people, I didn't realize it then, but a lot of people preferred meeting with someone like me. I felt maybe more sincere and more maybe accessible.
Well, and less intimidating.
Less
I think
intimidating,
as
absolutely.
as the traditional architect.
That's right.
Ego kind of.
I'm not the fascist, autocratic person.
Showy?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first project that kind of spurred you starting on your own was a really beautiful project that you worked on.
That's right. It's Takashimaya.
Yes.
Yeah. I had been working at freelance when I was working for the large firm, working at Takashimaya. In the beginning, it was more, the very first projects were not too much more than styling. Maybe we made a fixture or two and then did, they used to on the ground floor do special events and we would figure them out and make those happen.
And I guess I should say that Takashimaya was this incredible Japanese department store.
Oh,
and
I love propping there.
It was right on Fifth Avenue. It had was it 5 floors?
7.
7 floors. And you did that beautiful staircase, right? That was.
It's sort of
really
a Japanese department store from the time in a miniature, like Henry Bendel. It was like that kind of idea of
yes, it was
a whole building.
It was a boutique department store, and what was interesting about it was Takashimaya Japan is more, maybe in Japan they'll tell me I'm wrong, but more like a Macy's, more of a
more mainstream,
big, huge operation. In New York, they created a different. They were trying to do this concept globally. I believe there were ones in other places like Paris at the time, but the New York one was one of their bigger experiments, and it was a boutique department store, a very select, very kind of unique, curated experience. And it was Corky and Chi-Chi were my clients.
No, that's their names?
Their names.
Oh, okay.
Miss Corliss Tyler. She was the creative head of the New York store. She had been at Bergdorf's and created their giftware department prior. And they lured her over and she ran the whole store.
Wow.
And she's the one who kept on hiring us. So in the beginning, it was these style, and then we did some product, and then we started doing whole departments. And by the end, I had pretty much redesigned a good portion of that store.
So those renovations happened sort of within a certain number of years within the interior of it.
It was about 10 years of work.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was kind of the start of the
It was the
beginnings
start.
of...
Yeah, people would come in they would say, "Who did this? We want to know." And so I would get people who wanted their homes to look like Takashimaya, and then I would get...
I think we first start with a silken egg lamp. Do you remember that?
Yes,
it was
exactly.
one in like that yellow color.
Exactly.
It's so distinctive.
But then I'd get residential clients. I mean, I'd get retail clients who wanted their stores to look more residential because that's sort of what they picked out of our kind of generalized aesthetic at that store.
Yeah.
And what was your approach in terms of that, in terms of like a process for...
I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly, but I was curious in the beginning as to why they wanted an American architect to design a Japanese store. And the idea I got from Corky was that she really felt that this was, it was more international, and because I personally had a very streamlined and pared back, very Asian-inspired aesthetic, that it was a good fit for making that bridge to more of an international approach to that idea.
Sort of a Western meets Eastern kind of thing.
That's right.
And it seems like it's happening again with Printemps downtown.
Yeah.
It's Printemps in Paris is a little bit more mass. It's a little bit, but the one here is very curated.
Very high end, yeah.
Very high end.
I haven't been there yet, but and I'm a little bit skeptical because that room, the mosaic room,
Yes.
was one of my favorite rooms in New York.
Yes, it
Just
is.
stunning
It is, yeah.
architecturally. And
Yeah.
so I'm a little skeptical about how it has translated into a department store.
They've definitely, I feel like they left it alone, and it is one of those gaspy clutch your pearls moment when you walk in, because you're just like, how did they even do this? And that this was for just private clients, originally, like the public really didn't see that room. Right?
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
I do like the displays in it. I have to say, I really enjoy the displays. It's interesting. I was surprised the curation of the product and how you can actually touch these amazingly beautiful pieces of clothing that are hanging on 3 hangers, and they don't stop you. And the staff is very good, and so it's kind of it takes you back to something like Takashimaya, where it was so personal, and you went in there and
Unique experience.
and it was really unique. Yeah.
And do you feel like that helped define you and kind of create like a...
It definitely launched me.
Okay.
It was every time we finished a department there, it was published in multiple places, and people got to know. Not so much they didn't get to know me so much, but they got to know the work.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think? Like when Marcy was saying, and you touched on it a little bit, is when the process of meeting a client, someone sort of inquires about you, and it's like, I love his work, and then you meet them. The process of someone who hasn't ever worked with an architect before, is it a lot of hand-holding, or do you kind of have to explain, this is what happens next, I meet you, you tell me your criteria, or do you just take it and the feeling of, like, what do you expect from the client?
That question's a great one, and I tend to think that I'm pretty good at adjusting my approach depending on whoever the person is. And it takes a while to figure out the way they perceive the world, the way they make decisions, and the way they understand what it is I'm actually showing them. Because for a lot of people, showing them something 2D on a piece of paper, even if it's a rendering, doesn't jive necessarily with the experience they have when they actually go to the finished space.
Right.
So because I take the responsibility of spending other people's money pretty seriously,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that they have a pretty good understanding of something before we actually do it. So in certain cases, there is a lot of hand-holding, but listening to your being there with your father looking at plans, we have designed rooms for kids who are 10 and 12 and kind of
Get really into it?
yeah,
Well, that's a dream.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
and I just find that encouraging. And over the years, I do a lot of guest critting at schools, so I'm pretty used to working with people of all different levels of experience and understanding of building. But one of the first questions I ask people when I start to work with them, have you ever done this before, or did you come from a family that did work like this? Because it just does give me a pretty good indication of how much they actually know.
And does that change your approach potentially in terms of how you're going to present to them?
Well, the reason I ask the question is it allows me to understand how much to charge them.
It's going really well. If they use the word love 10 times, love it.
Right.
But do you like when a customer is very, very articulate about which would you rather work with? A customer that comes with tons of things, swipes, whatever, inspiration, whatever, or do you like the customer that says, David, I completely trust your aesthetic, go?
I like both extremes.
Both. Okay.
Yeah, both extremes. It's the ones in the middle who aren't ever sure, or
they
always
don't know what they
second-guessing.
want.
They don't know what they want, or they're never happy with what they get when it's done.
Okay.
Those are the ones that are difficult.
And I think this is kind of, we talked a little bit about you don't like to define your aesthetic too strictly. And I think it kind of goes to that whole idea of when you first start out with architects, the idea of I think you referred to them as like the fascist architect. Can you talk a little bit about like your ideology about that?
Yeah, I think we discussed this offline earlier. At that, it was interesting to me being schooled in an era where we were taught to idolize the autocrats, the Corbusiers and the Frank Lloyd Wrights and the Mies van der Rohes, and I did at the time. And I felt it was something lacking in me where I didn't have my own style. And I think by now some people recognize tendencies in my work, at least anyone who has followed my work or clients of mine who have hired me, so they've done their research. They understand the kind of sensibilities I bring to a project, but I don't ever want to define myself. I don't want to be ever blocked in or categorized in that I do this or I do that. I like to keep it open, and I like the collaborative experience. If I'm doing it with a client that has no opinion, I also just like to see and experiment what I can come up with on my own and challenge myself to do things that are not the kind of things I would normally do.
So do you have sort of a running list of, not a running list, but sort of the idea of, you know what, I've used that material before, I'm going to shy away from that, I'm not going to use this marble, I'm not going to use this tile.
Of course.
Then it's just kind of like, I'm looking for just something else. I think that's...
I mean, there's a lot of examples of that, but right now the Genere chairs, which are in every magazine article, I love them. They're beautiful,
Yeah.
but I would never use one.
Yeah.
They're just overused. And
Yeah.
Design Within Reach kind of killed everything.
It did.
It was good on one level that everyone could have good, well-designed pieces in their home.
Yeah.
But for me, it made it like, okay, this is just too iconic. You
Yeah.
can't use it. Now, there's a nuance to that, and I believe you can use these things. It's just that it has to be mixed well and
Yeah.
has to be placed well. There are beautiful
Exactly.
things that are in those categories that you just sort of steer away from.
I have to double check this, but you know, the copyrights on those certain designs have reached 75 years, almost 100, right? And so you're getting an influx of a lot of copies of those classic designs that they're up for grabs in a weird way.
Well, there was
right?
this really interesting thing early on. I worked with this guy as a draftsman early on, Michael Formica, very talented. Since he's passed away, but he got the rights to John Robs Gibbons because a lot of the designers were gay and had no family.
Yeah.
So when they died, the copyright to what they did was kind of up for grabs, and you could get it for practically nothing.
Wow.
He did that and made a lot of money owning because he bought it long before it was popular.
Yeah.
He reproduced some of the pieces himself, had it in showrooms, became a popular thing, and made a lot of money that way.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
is something interesting, not just in the 75-year rule, but in
The idea of that copyright that it
that's
died
right.
when
That's
when
right.
that person had no heirs, no
right.
foundation, no anything.
And at that time, those pieces were thought of as a little bit obscure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Alive Creative is now on YouTube. Search Alive Creative on YouTube or head to youtube.com/Alive Creative Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any episodes.
I wanted to talk about someone you work with, interiors writer Carol Person, and I want you to explain, one, to our listeners who Carol Person is. I had the pleasure of meeting her.
I may start to cry. But
I had the pleasure of meeting her because Fritz had, your partner, suggested that we shoot at her home for a story for a living, and I was with Shane Powers, and I fell in love with her because it was just like going to Auntie Mame's house, and we were both enamored by her. But how do you know her, and explain this amazing project that you guys did?
With a really funny brief.
Yeah.
yes, it was a very funny brief. So I met Carol through Fritz
Yeah.
because I think Fritz met her when she wrote a story at Martha.
Yeah.
And Fritz was the authority, or he was producing the story, and so she was the writer. And they met that way. So when I finished a project in the Village, which for a friend of mine, I called her because I knew she was the American editor of World of Interiors, which, for those of you who don't know, for us is
It
the
was
gospel.
Holy Grail.
Yes,
It was volumes and volumes
Yes.
of the heaviest magazines that
and they just were like they still are in some way.
Yep.
They still do incredible work. Anyway, I called her and she did publish that story. And I think it was after the second time that she submitted my work to Rupert. Actually, originally it was
Min.
Min.
Yeah.
But the second one was Rupert.
Min Hog.
Yes. And traditionally, I was even told at the time that World of Interiors did not like American interiors.
Yeah.
So I was very thrilled that they published 2 stories of mine. So she must have had it in her head that, okay, he can get me in this magazine. So
That she works for.
that she worked for. So she asked me to design something for her on her home. She had a beautiful house on Long Island.
And they were
Roslyn.
featuring the house, or were featuring sort of the carriage house of it?
Well, I'll get to that in a moment. She first she asked me. She said, "I have this boathouse.
Okay.
It's this little structure that is falling apart. It gets flooded a couple times a year, and it's in really bad shape. So I'd like it fixed up, and I want it to be a folly, something to take people to, maybe to have tea at, or do something, just an unexpected experience on the property, but." More important was she wanted it published in the magazine. So we
But
did.
she
we
didn't want
did-
to tell them, right?
Well, she didn't. That was the interesting thing. When she submitted the story to the magazine, she did not tell them it was her property.
Right.
So she did it fair and square. She wanted to get it in there, but she wanted to get it in there.
I can imagine that meeting. What do you think of this?
So the thing about this structure was it was just a very simple box. It had been cut up into little rooms. Maybe they were changing rooms. They stored some boats in there, and it was right on the water. And so first we restored the structure. We added a few things, and we painted. We put wetboard up to where the height that it flooded to, and we painted it in waterproof paint. But one of the funny things we did was we put all the furniture on ropes and pulleys. We were inspired by Yule Ulu from Auntie Mame.
Auntie Mame, again.
And again, they loved the story. It was actually a cover story. So, and it did do everything she wanted. It was a great place to take people for an unexpected experience, and she got it in her magazine.
And it was protected from floods.
And it's protected from
Did
floods.
she write the article as well?
She did. Yeah.
She hired herself.
It's a beautiful picture. It really is an amazing picture.
Yeah. It's a
It's
lot
sort
of
of
fun.
it's just playful.
Yeah.
You know, it's like these marionette things
And it's
hanging.
very unexpected, which is really fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you also do a lot of, you worked on a lot of retail, really special retail stores. Can we talk a little bit about some of those projects that you really...
I think my favorite of the big retail was Lanvin when Albert Hermès was alive. And
Were you nervous when you got this client?
When I
this
first
is
met
a
him?
big deal.
Oh, I was terrified meeting, of course. I'm terrified meeting everybody. I'm terrified meeting you guys.
I'd be terrified at pronouncing
That was a
Lanvin-
long time ago.
Lanvin incorrectly in a meeting.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, the thing about Albert is he's very huggable and very
Yeah.
likable, and we became really good friends.
Nice.
It was really a wonderful experience. I think Robert Ruffino told Albert to meet with me. That's how I met him. We hit it off, and we did like a record number of like 13 stores in 2 years, and each store was a flagship. It was just a wonderful, extraordinary experience.
And they were all different.
They were all different. They were all, dealing with a local feeling in a way,
Yeah.
in whichever way. He was just a wonderful person to collaborate with. But since then, Pierre Hardy, I love working with him. We did his shoe store here, and I did his apartment here in New York. And we did work at Dior.
Okay.
It was a kind of funny experience because Peter Marino had just finished the 57th Street store, and then we were brought in to change it.
Because they weren't happy.
I
with
think
it?
that the thing that I was told, and who knows, there were so many layers there, but the thing we were told was that they didn't think that it connected enough with the original Parisian store.
Oh.
So I spent a lot of time going back and forth to Paris which was so much fun.
Sounds terrible.
I have to do this.
We actually built the mock-up of it there before
Oh.
bringing it here. So we were very close to the original place and kind of working side by side. But at the same time, we were working with, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, but Eddie Slimane on the men's store in New York.
Okay.
With that, it was really taking he really directed the design of that, and we really interpreted it into the space.
Okay. And do you feel like there's a big difference in how you approach retail spaces with private, in terms of and private homes, or do you feel like sometimes it's back and forth, or do you feel like it's a different?
I think the objectives are different. I think in people's homes, it's very personal. There's a lot more. There's a lot more emotion attached to working on somebody's actual home.
Yeah.
I find that actually the most rewarding work. I love doing retail. I love doing corporate and hospitality. They're all fun. But the most fun is really creating home for others.
And why do you feel?
Honestly, if I go dig deep emotionally, I think I came from a broken home, and maybe I'm trying to put it back together myself. And maybe being gay, you always felt like that was something that wasn't to be yours, and maybe because of it became a hyper objective to make home.
Yeah, that's that's interesting. One question I wanted to ask, with these stores all over the world, I'm always fascinated with the logistics of actually doing it. That you don't shy away with, like, oh, there's a house in Brazil I'm going to be building, or there's this place in Dublin. How do you even navigate teams for that? And you had mentioned a little bit on how you did it, but practicality, how does it work?
Well, there's a term called executive architect.
Okay.
And that's where you hire a local architect that actually watches over your work there and becomes your eyes and ears locally for it.
And permits.
And getting it through all that stuff. But when you mentioned that, I do remember at Lanvin we were producing some of the millwork in a shop outside of Shanghai. We drove there, and there were chickens rolling around. There was a roof over just half of it. Whereas in America, when you go to a millwork shop, there's like a vacuum, it's like this
HVAC systems that
sealed
pull everything.
environment where they don't want to get a little pebble on anything. And you're like looking at this thing like, oh my God, this is kind of third world. How are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
How am I going to quality control here? But there are ways, and sometimes they don't work.
Yeah. And also to get used to, we lived in Europe for a while. We went through a renovation, and just the getting used to how things are done in Europe, the way they do electrical, the way they do patchwork. It was the first time I think I've seen Bondo used so much in woodworking and just, repairs and paintings, and those craftsmen of painters and plasterers are all sort of specialized. I think that's amazing. It's really amazing.
It is different everywhere. And I did a lot of work in China, not just on the stores, but I had a good friend who became the dean of the architecture school at USC, but he was born in China, and we were collaborating on projects in China, in Jade Valley. Mm-hmm. He was building a winery resort, and I was doing the interiors, and he did the architecture. And that was fascinating, going there, working with the local craftsmen, and just creating this truly unique experience.
Scale, what is, you redid your kitchen, that sometimes the spacing in a kitchen in Europe is a little tighter than spacing. It was like in America, an island, you need this much space around it, and
we need big houses here.
Yeah.
Everything's on steroids here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Let's take a little quick break. So David, I know you've mentioned before that PR is really integral to the success of your company. And I feel like that landscape's changed. So can you talk a little bit about how that was for you and how it worked for you? And have you had to adapt and change based on how things are now with media?
Especially as sort of generally a shy, as you get older, you're probably
No, but he
less.
refers to himself as a press whore.
I'm a total press whore.
A quiet press whore.
A quiet, shy press whore. Yes. In the beginning, it actually started with Takashimaya. We finished the 7th floor, the beauty floor, and I knew it was going to get a decent amount of press. So I hired a PR agency, and to their frustration, I said to them, I want to get as much press as I can, but you can't go to any magazine, interior design magazine editors about well stories. The well stories are the
Right.
big stories in the middle of the magazine. I want, to give advice on color, or, the one sentence here, the one sentence there, the glib remarks. I wanted a lot of synergy around the story that was coming out. I wanted them to create another level of buzz.
Like a ripple effect?
A ripple effect, so that there would be just a little bit of energy behind the actual story that came out.
Okay.
And I continued to work that way for a number of years. I said, you can't talk to these people, because by that point, I did know a lot of the main editors
Right.
of magazines, and I always felt like they wanted it to come from me. Like, I
Yeah.
have this story that I think, you might like, and
And the
And once
proprietary,
the
like,
one
if
big
it's been
thing-
printed, I'm not touching it anymore,
Right. I was
kind
going
of
to say,
thing.
the one
yeah.
big thing comes out, then
Yeah.
it takes away the opportunities for the other
That's
things.
absolutely right. You had to be sensitive about, who was seeing it first and where it appeared and all of this. There's this whole like dance around any of that kind of work. So that's the way it used to be. And then for a number of years, I thought, okay, well, I don't really need press. I kind of like, I was actually kind of shying back from one point of view that I think a lot of people thought of me as a best kept secret. That
Which is a nice...
Yeah,
Yeah.
that maybe they thought I was as good as the A-listers on all those lists, but that I didn't charge as much. And I wasn't as
well,
known.
that-
and that they can also present the home as their work and not my work. So
Right.
it kind of was counterproductive at some point. But now we enter into a new realm, and we did hire an agency a couple of years ago, Nylon, and we're very happy with them because they seem to understand the new media, which I frankly don't.
Yeah.
And they've gotten us a number of stories in the digital world, and they have helped us focus on how to operate in that new landscape. And they've been very good at it.
Is that part of, because I noticed on your website too, you have where all your employees write articles about different things that, as part of the processes that they're working on their stories, which I thought was really interesting. Is that part of that strategy?
It's kind of diabolical, but it's been interesting because we have been able to express ourselves and talk about things, and in doing so, to actually think about these things. So it is helpful for us in a nurturing way, but the real reason was an algorithm. You have the right words, it drives more people to your site. And
The SEO,
it's kind
yeah,
of this, this.
yeah.
So you get good with some of the the evil side.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you also, speaking of PR, you worked on a beautiful book that was published in 2017.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that, was that part of the thinking with that, was as a portfolio piece for
Portfolio?
yourself, but also a way to showcase your work holistically, as opposed to with magazines, you get one story here, one story there, you get to kind of create.
I think everything you said was a part of what we were trying to do there. But my initial reasoning was more to kind of take a really hard look at all that I've done. It's hard when you're just doing all this and you're just going out there and churning out the work.
What was the name of the book?
It's just called
MR.
MR on
Okay.
the. It just has MR and the picture of a house that we've done, and I think that the reason I had for writing it was to really analyze the work that my firm had done up to that date, in order to kind of figure out where we wanted to go in the future, but in terms of the process, I think the other thing that was happening was that Fritz, my partner, was doing a book at the time, and I watched him. I watched him every night in our little kitchenette at the table with a stack of Xeroxes, going through and organizing and figuring out, how it would fall into the well and all of this. And I have to say, William Kluges, who's been with me for, I think, something like 25 years, one of my key associates, really poured his heart out over the book. He really lorded over it, just like he would on any architectural projects. And it was approached like that. Like, you have the design phase and the production phase, and making sure that the end product came out the way we wanted it to. So it was a really interesting process. But I think there was also a question earlier about, maybe not on camera, but about how I found the publisher.
Yeah, for someone who decides, you know what, I do want to sort of diary all my projects, and I think it's a good time now. Do you do layouts, or do you just present somebody? How do you find a publisher for something like that?
I think that at that time, I think our website was probably strong enough already, and maybe there was enough of a buzz about us. And I think that these publishers, we didn't have to pay for it. They gave us a stipend for it, but
Like an advance
for it. But I think that they somehow figure out that there's enough of an audience to sell enough copies to make up the money that they put out on it.
Yeah.
I don't think my book certainly wasn't a huge runaway. It wasn't on the New York Times bestseller list.
Did they have a lot of say in the edit of projects, copy, cover, things like that?
The big fight was the cover. On my cover, the fight was the fact that if you put the house on the cover, and a lot of the work on the inside is interiors, we did have a couple of architectural projects on the inside. They thought that the bookstores would have a hard time figuring out whether it goes in the architecture department or the interior department. And I thought, I don't care.
Yeah.
And
they're kind of right next to each other on that.
Exactly. I mean, it is a house about
Yeah.
domestic design. I don't,
Yeah.
I just think you shouldn't
Does
have
everything fall into a strict
Well,
category?
I also think like that.
Yeah.
The title over those bookcases are art and interior, architecture and
Yeah.
interiors. It's like it goes hand in hand.
No, that's
Right.
definitely true.
But I talked with Rizzoli's, and I talked with Pointed Leaf Press. I had a number of meetings with, and I really, really, really liked the head of Pointed Leaf Press. She was wonderful. But in
This
the
is
end-
cold calling the publishers, or
Well,
did you have like a contact?
I had contacts
Okay.
with every one of these places.
Okay.
Ellen Morrissey knew some of them. You know her, and through Fritz, I knew some, and I knew some on my own as well. So I contacted a number of them, Asseline, but I went with Abrams mainly because that's the publisher that Fritz used, and I used the same person there.
Okay.
And we worked with, we went through the same route. So it was a little bit of, okay, we already know the pluses and minuses of going that route.
with this play,
Right.
with this person.
That makes sense. So you've talked a lot about mentoring like young talent at your own firm and shining a light on people there. And I know that you also work with schools and talk to different young people, and that's an important part of nurturing young talent.
That's right.
And what do you look for in that, and how do you like to help them?
When you're critting at the schools, I think my objective there is to almost like being with a client. You're trying to figure out what it is they're trying to accomplish, and try to help them get to the best possible result. And that's what I see is trying to get them to open up, to understand the possibilities, and to steer them to get the right objective. So in architecture school, it's about communicating through drawings or verbally and expressing your ideas as clearly and as interestingly as you can. And I think that is what I look for, and that's what I think I'm doing when I do that work. The same in my office when I'm working on a project. I try to, I really try hard to get the most out of everybody.
Should we talk a little bit about you and Fritz?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So, and as people know, I met Fritz was my first boss, and I met David through Fritz very happily. And your contrast as a couple is, I know, I think you said, did you do a talk at Parsons or?
We did.
About it? Because Fritz is the maximalist.
Yes.
And David's the minimalist. And I think you complement, coming from me, I'm going to talk and say you complement each other incredibly well. And I think the commonality of your curiosity and your genuine knowledge and kindness you make so much sense.
Yeah.
Aside of the visual side of it.
And I experienced this because my husband and I went to a cocktail party at your apartment when you lived on 10th? On 10th.
Street. Mm-hmm.
And, you come up to this apartment and it is minimal. I think you just had a bed.
That's right.
Just a bed.
It's really an altar.
An altar. Yes. And was it fur? No, was it?
It was fur.
It was.
Yeah. And so my husband was just like, where's the stuff? It had this beautiful sort of outdoor garden. And
The
a
terrace was like twice or three times as big as
Yeah.
the
The
apartment.
terrace was
It was a
huge.
beautiful. It was a beautiful apartment, but it's on everyone's mind. It's like, how is this even done? Minimal to the point where, especially when I went there because I got invited by Fritz. So I'm like, where's this stuff?
So that's before Fritz moved in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we were dating at the time. I had 3 Prada suits in my closet.
I remember that. Looking in the closet, like, what?
And didn't you have shirts at the office or something too? Or was it like
No, I had them there.
That was I felt like in a lot of design firms, that was the goal. In art, in design firms, it was like, I want a comme des garçons suit that I can wear every day. It's a uniform,
Right.
and it's totally. I feel like at the time period of it, it was the goal.
Well,
for
the
that.
reason I moved out of that apartment was Fritz did move in, and we were very happy there for a while. But I had a 3-foot wide closet, and I put a piece of black tape around the bar and said, halfway, and said, you can have this half, and I get the other half. I thought my 3 suits would be fine. And his hangers, the hook did go to the black tape, but the suits went way over, and my 3 Prada suits were getting completely like smushed. So we moved uptown to a fancier apartment with 7 closets. I took 1 and he took the other 6. And I do not open his closets. I'm afraid of them.
Well, you also said, you had this thought about designing a home where it would be a huge space with a glass wall in between, and you could visually see his side and your side, and
The cross section
The
of stuff
cross-section.
through that,
Yeah.
and it would be like an archaeological dig. The whole thing would be just a mass of stuff, and I'd have 1 chair.
yeah.
But it would be beautiful stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Have you always-
Oh, of course, with Fritz, it's all beautiful.
And he
It's
makes
just-
it look beautiful
Yeah.
Yes.
And he knows where everything is, which is
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
crazy.
in his own way.
Were you always like that even as a child?
Yes,
Very minimal.
I had an immaculate room that was very minimal. It was weird, but
And your mother didn't know you were gay.
that's the funniest thing is my mother said she could tell I was gay when I was 2.
Mine did too.
What
She
was her
did?
reason?
Yes.
I was probably, there's a picture of me and my sister, and I'm carrying a Barbie doll.
Okay.
Maybe that was.
We
the
would have
clue.
been friends, David. We totally would have been friends.
So one of the last questions we usually like to ask is, what is the best advice you've ever received? And then in turn, what was the best advice you feel like you could give?
I think I mentioned the last time
Yeah.
the best advice I ever received was to use a straight edge when I letter.
Yes.
Because my lettering was sloppy, and I still think of that because it gave me a structure that I use mentally, even for everything. Because
Yeah.
I am so obsessive about making things just beyond perfect.
Yeah.
So I think I still find that is true. The best advice I can give to people is to follow their passion and to work as hard as they can to take on every opportunity. Some of them are not going to go anywhere, but eventually, and not to give up, to be as persistent as you possibly can, because even though it feels like nothing's ever going to happen your way or be the way you want it, eventually it will. If you're persistent enough, it will. Opportunities do happen.
I think that's great advice. So should we take a quick break and then we'll come back and talk about what's inspiring us this week?
Sure.
Okay. So Mel, what's inspiring you this week?
Mine is an account called, and I hope I'm not butchering this, it's called Baumgartner Restoration. They're out of Chicago. I think it's a second generation. His name is Julian Baumgartner. And,
We'll put a link in there. so
yeah, and
everybody-
people like, that people have these ASMRs of just what relaxes them, and this guy just relaxes me. People send him portraits, museum sends him portraits, and it's all about cleaning and restoring portraiture, and he does it in such a systematic way where it's just so instantaneous with this huge Q-tip and some mineral spirits, and he's rubbing it, and it's like all of a sudden you see the flesh come up, and it's just, this is the original color. And all his restoration is reversible, which is that at any point it needs to go back to some place, to an original thing. It can be removed, and I've learned a lot of things from him. I like fixing bad art,
That sounds
landscape
wonderful.
art. And he shows you how to fix tears and things like that. So it's really quite relaxing, and we'll put that link in.
Yeah, I like accounts like that, and it's kind of similar to what I'm going to have for this week for myself, is you kind of can adapt things that you learn there that might help you with something else you're working on. And this week, what I was going to talk about is Lone Goose Company on Instagram. It's this girl who's, I think she initially hired a woodworker, and then he got, he couldn't finish the work, but he said he would teach her how to do it. So that's how she started. So she's kind of self-taught, but had help. And she builds amazing built-ins, and I'm back in the
On
realm-
her own.
On her own, yeah.
Wow.
And so I look for clues. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting tool. I don't have that. Maybe this. So I'm looking at that now because I'm back in my home.
Are you building things in your own home?
I'm gonna work on it's not a full. I'm gonna build out my closet, so it's an interior closet, and then if I start to build some confidence, maybe I'll do a larger built-in, or maybe I'll hire somebody. We'll see how it goes. But I enjoyed looking at that and kind of getting a sense of the process and how doable it might be. So I've kind of been inspired by her this week.
Fantastic.
How about you, David?
What inspires me, I think, I'm finding myself, especially in our current geopolitical climate, inspired by kindness, honesty, and humor. Those are things that really not only inspire but motivate.
You know, that empathy that, everybody wants to work with nice people. I think it just goes farther, and I've always said it. But
Absolutely.
And all of those things motivate people
That's
in
right.
a way that the opposites of what they are do not.
That's absolutely true.
So.
And I think that, to me, that is the most important.
Yeah.
Is to enjoy your experiences.
yeah,
David, thank you so much for joining us. This
Oh,
has
this
been
is so much
so
fun.
much fun.
it was such a pleasure having you.
Thank you both. This has been great fun for me as well.
For our listeners, if you want to learn more about David and MR Architecture, please be sure to check out the show notes as well as our website, www.alifecreativepod.com.
Our producer is Chris Kangas. Our theme music was composed by Pierce McIntyre. And a special thanks to all the amazing people at East 10th House Studio.